Stop. The procedures shown in this video involve working around ESD-sensitive components and potentially live parts. If in any doubt, consult a qualified technician before beginning any work. If your equipment is still under warranty, you should use the free repair service offered by the manufacturer.
Hello, this is Paul, and this is the first video on my new electronics channel here on YouTube. And today, I'm going to attempt to repair this LED television by Tesco's in-house brand Technika. It is the LED32-E251, and it has been exhibiting a fault for quite some time, which I shall now demonstrate. Right, what I've done is I've switched the television on the power switch underneath, so it is now on standby. Red light on. Remote control, blue light comes on. Okay, what should happen is that the picture should then come up and it should display information about what channel it's tuned to or such like. However, the backlight comes up, which is normal. Then, as you saw there, it will abruptly cut back to standby and then reattempt. Like so. So my first attempt at repair will be on the logic board, which is basically the board where all the HDMI ports, antenna jack and the rest of it are. So without further ado, I'm going to get the back off this and we're going to have a look at fixing it. Okay, the television has actually now been moved into my radio room, or the shack as I will call it if you are a regular viewer to my amateur radio videos on my amateur radio channel. So, obviously, TV have stickers on it that basically say, "Caution, risk of electric shock, do not open." Now, that's only if you're a bit daft and you touch the wrong part. There is obviously a warning at the beginning of the video, as you will have seen, because I don't want people electrocuting themselves. So, first and foremost, to get the back off this TV, you have to take all the screws out, wherever there's an arrow. That might not apply to your TV as such, it might not be as obvious, but on this, it's actually quite straightforward. Any screws where there are arrows have to come out. So, the only exceptions to that rule are the screws in the metal parts where the board sits. So, and you don't take this one out either by the mains cable. I will just turn the camera to show you, which is here. Don't take that one out either, you don't need to remove that. So obviously it's going to have warning, risk of electric shock, do not open, and refer all servicing to qualified service personnel, but this isn't exactly a difficult job if you know what you're doing. So our interest is this side, where all the connectors are, all these ones. And the first thing we need to do is take the lid off. Now this is a bit difficult because I've got to try and do this without knocking the camera. I've already removed the screws, so that should be one less job for me to do on the camera. I'm not going to put the screws back in on camera either, because you know it's going to be a bit more of more work for me. Right, so I shall remove the rear cover of this TV off camera, as it's obviously going to be quite large and quite difficult to do. Okay, we're now inside the TV, and first thing we need to do is disconnect any wires holding the back on. First of all, that one there which is for the speakers, there's one on the other side for the power supply. Be very careful when going near that, as there are components known as capacitors on there if you're not fully versed with electronics. I will explain. capacitors are quite nasty when they're fully charged, if they have any charge in them. So it is vital to make sure they're discharged. And the last one that should be holding the lid on should be these ones here on this TV. So allow me to swing the lid up and rest it there on my window ledge. So this is the board we're interested in, just this one. When you do this with your own TV, make sure you get the right part, because getting the wrong part and you could find yourself wasting your money. Now the board's fastened on with screws, and there are also some metal surrounds on the thing as well, which all have to come off. And the tools you need to take that off, nothing more than a screwdriver. So I'm going to prep this by disconnecting the wiring. Now before I continue, I'm going to draw attention to the middle of the board. Okay. So we've got this connector here, this big long black one. There is a white dot on the end of it that indicates pin 1. Remember that. You will need to obviously put that back on the right way round, otherwise the screen doesn't work. So, and when you are ordering your parts, it's always wise to take the back off first to have a look anyway. See, because you'll need to know the screen panel type, which you can't see on the picture at the moment. I'll zoom back out to get that. So there's a sticker on the panel that tells you who made it, the part number, and then obviously there's information on the board as well that will also be necessary to know for your order. So to remove, you'll see there's all bits of silver tape as well, don't worry too much about that. So disconnect all the wiring you can see from the board before you begin, including this, taking care not to break it. That's still attached though, and that's still attached because the ground goes to a screw on the board. That will be removed later. This one also needs to be disconnected because we need to take this board out, but we will be reinstalling that board later. So once you've disconnected all your wires, you can just put them to one side, make sure they're out of the way, and then the next thing you need is a screwdriver. 9 times out of 10 the screws in here are posi drive, or Phillips. So posi drive or Phillips screwdriver. So if there's any Torx screws you'll soon see them, but 9 times out of 10 they're posi drive or Phillips. So the next thing you need to be doing is getting a screwdriver and removing the board. Okay, so once you've got your screwdriver, if it's one of the ratchet types, make sure it's set to remove the screws. It's either done by, on this screwdriver it's done by this collar here, or on some screwdrivers it's a little switch. I do have a screwdriver in that kind of design. So what I'm going to do first is take this metal plate off, and then I'll explain the reason for that. So I already did a dry run of removing the board, and I found it was a little bit hard to remove with this metal plate in place. So there's only 2 screws holding this one in. That piece of tape isn't holding it, it's just there to create an earth, I'm guessing. So take the 2 screws out. The other metal plate isn't screwed in because I didn't screw that back on. I subsequently discovered that I should have screwed it on before putting this board in. So take the 2 metal plates off. They're kind of reminiscent of the sort of thing you'd find in a computer. Right, next, before we take that board out, I'm going to take this little board out here. Now these screws and the ones holding this board in all have washers on them. Keep them together. It's a spring washer and a flat washer. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera, but keep that together, don't lose them. So we take this board out here. Right. Okay. And that's this board removed. Put this to one side, you will need it later if you are repairing this TV. Anything other TV, obviously it's going to be completely different. Don't remove that piece of foam, that stays. Okay, next we need to take this board out. So first thing we need to do, remove the screw holding the cable between the screen and the board. Spare connector there that I forgot to remove. Just pop that up there for the minute. The screw should stay in there, it shouldn't disappear anywhere. Just remember that when you're putting it back together. I nearly forgot. As you can see, I've already been in here and took this board out just as a dry run, so I knew what I was doing. It was worth practicing because I had nothing to lose, the TV was broken anyway. Next thing we need to do is remove this board. I haven't taken any ESD precautions with this board because obviously it's completely dead and therefore there's not really any point, but with the new board I will be doing so, and I will explain how to do that very shortly. Okay, and that is your logic board removed. When you order your new part, sometimes it's worth looking on the back of here to find any information that would be a clue to what it is. Now this should work with most TVs of a similar design to this. This TV was also sold not long after Technika discontinued this under the Blaupunkt name. Why, I don't know. So what you need to do is you need to put this board to one side. Do not mix it up with the new board. So next, you've got your bare space with all your wires. You need them to connect something, which is why we need a new board. But before we can touch the new board, we have to take the necessary anti-static precautions. And the reason for doing this is to prevent any damage to sensitive components through electrostatic discharge. I'll probably cover more of this when taking computers apart as well. However, you don't have to see it, hear it or feel it for it to do any damage. If you can see it, that's usually a very high voltage. If you can hear it, it's still very high. If you can feel it, it's definitely high. So the next thing to do is to ground yourself. Now there's a few ways of doing this. Unpainted parts of a computer chassis connected to ground. I've got some computer chassis here, but they're not connected to ground. Or alternatively, an anti-static wrist strap. I do have some of these, but not to hand, unfortunately, for this video. So I'm going. Actually, I have a strap, but I don't have a cable to connect it. So not to hand for this video. So in essence, I'm going to have to do this the other way. Conveniently located power supply, which is plugged in and has a connection to ground. Make sure you're discharged, because walking up and down on carpets is going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. Unfortunately, the flooring here is carpeted. Okay, so, new part. Hopefully, identical. Okay, Now the new part arrived off eBay and it was wrapped in pink bubble wrap. Pink bubble wrap is anti-static bubble wrap. Now the seller has said that this has been tested. Basically told the customer who was viewing the items, in this case me, that the board was tested before shipping, and so this should therefore work. When grabbing boards, do not grab them by any microchips or any other sensitive components. There we go. Spot the difference? Okay, so I'm going to try and grab these by anything connected to the chassis ground. So what I need to do is turn that round and place it on the correct standoffs. Obviously I'm going to grab anything that's not likely to be conductive and therefore cause a problem. So it needs to line up with the standoffs like so. Okay. Obviously the areas I want to avoid are all those microchips there. There's a jumper there, 12 volt, 5 volt. The old board had that on. That stays at 12 volts, do not touch it. If it's not at 12 volts, then obviously not right. That relates to certain electronic compatibilities. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start putting the screws in that. Let's check for damage. There appears to be none. Let's start putting the screws back in. Remember, it's the screws with the spring washers. Those go in first. And also remember, not the top corner there. So, first things we need to do, make sure that the board is lined up with the appropriate standoffs. And begin. Now something I've learned from computer building is if you start at the bottom and then do the one diagonally to it, will usually prevent stress on the board. This is quite fiddly considering that I've got to line this up with a standoff, and while at the same time screwing the screw into the board. Once my screwdriver clicks, it means my screwdriver is not set correctly. Right, and that tells me the screw's tight. Do not over tighten these screws, otherwise you risk crushing and damaging the board. And the seller will not honour the warranty if you do that, assuming there's any warranty at all. So this board, logic board, 2 screws. One at the bottom corner next to the white connectors and 2 HDMI, one on the top corner next to the card slot and the header pin connection for the rest of the sockets. Slightly difficult to do. That's now in. Again, remember, do not over tighten, which is why I recommend using a ratchet screwdriver, because once it starts clicking, Might give you an indication of how tight your screws are. Now, one of the things I'm going to do next is put this bracket back in and see if I can put the board in that goes in there before putting that in, along with the screw. Now the screw for that should be with the rest of the screws for the case. And the reason why I'm doing this is because last time I tried to put the screw back in for that, it didn't go in. So what I will need to do is find the hole it goes into, which is this top one here, and pop that in first. Because otherwise the connector ports are in the way and I can't get the screw in. And that is a fiddle on in of itself. I won't fasten it down completely, and there's a reason that I'm going to explain. Should still be able to swing out a little. That's obviously fastened down completely. I'm just going to slacken it off a tiny bit so that it should have a little bit of lateral movement. That's so I can get this back in. If I can't get that back in, I cannot line it up with the header pins properly. That's why there needs to be some lateral movement. And it seems this has worked. And it is in. Yeah, still a bit of lateral movement and it went in. No problems at all. Okay, so those are now all connected. And that's now reassembled. Which now means there should be 2 screws left with the spring washers for that top board, which will now be fastened down, and then there will be the outstanding silver screws used to fasten the rest of this up. Okay, so that should now be on. So I now need to put back into place the front metal plate, which has the holes on it for 2 HDMI ports, an audio port, a computer monitor, the European SCART connector, which is starting to disappear from TVs but can still be found. Antenna connector, because this is a British TV, the connector is of the Belling and Lee type, not the F type, although I'd much rather it was an F type. So that screws onto there, which joins with the plate that is in fact housing a digital audio connection, USB connection, another HDMI, the slot for the common interface, analog video and audio, and component video and a headphone jack. Headphone jack is something that might be quite useful to myself if the TV does fire up and live after this operation. And the reason for that is because the TV I intend it to replace doesn't have a headphone jack, and I want to use an aux lead between it and a hi-fi system. Well, that's for another day. So, let's see. Spot the difference? You can't really. It's very difficult to tell. So, there's not much difference in it. Let's get rid of that, because that's no longer necessary. Because that was on the connectors there. So, what we need to do now is we need to start reconnecting. Firstly, start with this one here. It plugs into there. That connector might be red, but it is in fact the connector that connects that to that. That's all that's for, nothing else. So, obviously there's one more screw to put in, but we'll come back to that momentarily. As this comes from the lid, this will be last. So next thing we need to do is connect this red connector. And bearing in mind these connectors only fit one way. That's the amp power connector, not that one, which I thought was inverter. That's inverter. They're all keyed, so they'll all only fit in one place, like so. Now, although that says inverter, I will explain that this is LED backlit, and therefore there's actually no inverter. It's supplying power straight to the LEDs in the panel. So, obviously the last thing to do is to put the black connector back on, which supplies the video signal to the panel. Sometimes known as LVDS. Remember the white dot? Pin 1. Right, so, make sure it goes on without bending any of the header pins or breaking any of the wires. They are very fine wires, and thus very susceptible to breakage. And then remember the screw that we left in the grounding post? We can put that back in. So that ground wire is now on. That's now connected. And that appears to be fitted in place. There's just one connector left on this board, one connector left on that board, and also one connector left on the power supply unit board. And then all I've got to do is put the screws back in the back. I will do that off camera, as it takes a while. So the last thing I'm going to do is reconnect the connectors coming from the lid. I'm going to start with this one, for sake of argument. That then connects onto the board, like so. Then I will connect speakers. Obviously you can't watch TV without sound, it's just no fun. And then finally, the power supply. Remember what I said about the capacitors. best to keep your fingers away from them. Otherwise, you might get a very nasty electric shock. So, that's now all the wires connected up. I shall now get the screws in and we'll get it in position and see if it's ready to roll. Okay, that's the TV rebuilt and the back on, and I've put it into where I hope to have it. Its final place. This will focus. Be good. It's currently in standby. Let's see if my work has paid off. So we've got the blue light. That's normal. There we go. We have a working TV. I don't believe it. It actually works. I'm impressed. And that's given me my bedroom's now TV box. Well, so, if you want a TV repairing, don't send it off for repair out of warranty because it's just going to cost you too much. Go on eBay, get the parts and have a go yourself. It is well worth it, believe me. So, what can I say? It should reinitialize. All I have to do now is tell it to go to Freeview because I can't do anything else. And there you go. It even gets a television channel, but it says there's no signal strength. But that's not a problem because I'm going to completely initialize the TV by way of a complete system reset. Okay. I think that's reset the menu system and TV channels. So, okay, so all I need to do, I'm sure I want to do that. There we go. We're back at first time installation. Okay, I just got to change that to, I don't want it on Eco Home. Well, I'll only do a demo or Eco Home, so I'll have to use Eco Home. So English UK Eco Home. Okay. And then it tells me if I get into any difficulties, blah blah blah. And it's just come up with static because it seems to think that there's still an analog signal, although there isn't. Right, so now it's going to go through everything, including all the analog channels, unfortunately, because it doesn't know that they've gone. So, that's it. I'll just let it do what it's got to do. So, have a good evening, or afternoon, or morning, or whenever time you're watching this. Ooh. Yeah, I think it's finding all the mobile phone signals. No, it hasn't yet. It's finding all the digital TV signals. It's not able to do anything with them. It's fun. Right, so have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're watching this. And don't forget to check out my other videos. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. And don't forget to check out my other channels. I have a soon to be upcoming cars channel where I'll be looking at all things car related. It may actually be on by the time you watch this, that depends. And I also have my amateur radio channel. Please check this out if you're interested in radio communications in any way, shape or form. So, that's ta-ta for now.